The late morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Grand Cambridge Hotel, bathing the dining room in a warm golden glow. The room was vast, yet cozy, with polished marble floors that shimmered under the light and round tables dressed in crisp white linens. Fresh flowers in glass vases sprinkled color across the space, each arrangement artfully chosen to match the soft pastel walls. Guests moved quietly between tables, the soft click of fine china and whisper of silverware on porcelain creating a gentle symphony. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their many facets catching stray rays of sun and scattering tiny rainbows. Across the ceiling, Jerome Carter moved among the tables with quiet confidence. He carried a tray laden with gleaming wine glasses that held bright red strawberry spritzers, garnished with mint leaves. Each step was sure and steady. He knew the floor plan so well that he never needed to glance at a map. His uniform was crisp and clean, a black vest over a white shirt, trousers pressed into sharp creases, and a name tag that read Jerome. He greeted each table with a polite smile and offered menus with a respectful bow, never letting his calm composure slip even when the lunch crowd grew busy. At one corner of the room, a large round table drew extra attention. 5 women dressed in high fashion sat there, their laughter and chatter floating across the dining room. Their dresses were made of silk and lace, in colors bright enough to stand out among the more muted tones of the other guests. Their purses lay on velvet chairs beside them, glittering with metal clasps and designer logos. They spoke in confident, clear voices, sharing stories about recent shopping trips and holiday plans. Their joy was genuine, yet their tone carried a sense of privilege that sometimes made the rest of the room feel like background scenery. Marjorie Sinclair sat at the center of that table. She was a tall woman, with pale skin and sharply styled, blonde hair that framed her face like a halo. Her eyes, a cool shade of blue, scanned the room with practiced ease. She wore a pale pink dress that fit her like a glove, and a pearl necklace rested at the base of her throat. To anyone watching, she looked like the picture of success and grace, yet her smile carried an edge of playfulness that hinted she enjoyed being the center of attention. As the waiter at her table finished taking orders, Marjorie tapped her long red nails on the glass tabletop. She glanced at her friends and lowered her voice. "I wonder if our waiter can play something on the piano over there," she said, nodding toward the far corner of the room where a black grand piano stood, adorned with a single vase of fresh roses. Her friends leaned in, curious smiles spreading across their faces. One of them, a woman with dark curls piled high on her head, whispered, "Do you think he can?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Another friend wearing large sunglasses, despite the indoor lighting, laughed softly. "Let's find out," she said. And with that, they sat back, exchanging amused glances. Jerome returned to their table, placing menus gently in front of each woman. "May I get you started with anything?" he asked in a steady, polite tone. Marjorie's smile widened slightly. She said, "Yes, thank you, Jerome. But first, can you play us something on the piano? Little jazz, maybe?" The question was posed lightly, as if she truly believed he was the pianist. Jerome paused, his face betraying a hint of surprise. He looked toward the piano, then back at the table. The other guests turned their heads, curiosity piqued by the unexpected request. Across the room, the pianist on duty, a middle-aged man in a dark suit, paused mid-note. He watched Jerome for a moment, uncertain. The dining room fell into a hush, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant clink of silverware. Jerome felt a flush rise up his neck. He knew everyone was watching him now. He took a breath and managed a small smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not the pianist." Marjorie's eyes narrowed slightly and she laughed, a bright, clear sound. "Oh, come on," she teased. "You can't tell me you never sat at these keys before." Her friends joined in, giggling as they probed him with questions. Jerome placed his hands on the back of a chair, steadying himself. He glanced at the piano once more. The polished black surface called to him, but he knew the real pianist would not appreciate an impromptu replacement. "I promise, ma'am," Jerome said. "I've never played professionally." He gave another polite bow and moved to leave, but Marjorie's mischievous smile held him in place.
Ow.
She watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. The room waited with bated breath, the invisible tension growing as Jerome stood poised between embarrassment and relief. Then something remarkable happened. Behind Marjorie's table, a soft cough came from the music critic seated at a small table near the windows. His notebook lay open, pen in hand, and he cleared his throat again, louder this time. "Why don't we give him a chance?" he suggested, his voice rich and warm. He smiled at Jerome from across the room. "I'd love to hear what you can." "Do?" Marjorie blinked in surprise. Her friends exchanged confused glances. Critic's encouragement changed the mood in an instant. The hush in the room shifted from tension to expectant curiosity. Jerome felt his heart flutter, but he straightened his shoulders. He had never thought of himself as a performer, but music had always been part of his life. As a young boy, he had played the family piano at home, filling the small suburban living room with ragtime tunes and classical pieces. Life's demands had led him away from music, but that memory stirred something deep within him. Jerome walked to the piano, each step measured and deliberate. The crystal reflections danced on the polished wood as he paused before the bench. He looked once more at Marjorie's table, her confident, poised gaze now softened by surprise, and then at the critic, who nodded encouragingly. Jerome lowered himself onto the bench, his uniform trousers creaking softly.
Ow.
He placed his hands on the ivory keys. The room fell silent, and even the chandeliers seemed to dim in deference to the moment. Jerome closed his eyes for a beat, recalling the melody inside him. Then, with a gentle touch, his fingers found the first notes of Duke Ellington's Take the A-Train. Opening chords filled the room, warm and inviting. A hush turned into a collective intake of breath as Jerome's playing grew more confident, each note resonating with feeling and skill. The simple jazz melody wove through the dining room like a ribbon of sound. Jerome's fingers danced across the keys, shifting seamlessly from rich chords to delicate flourishes. Guests leaned closer to their tables, glasses paused mid-air, and even the busy waitstaff slowed their pace to listen. Marjorie sat forward, her mouth slightly open in disbelief. Her friends looked at one another, eyes wide with amazement. As the final notes echoed and faded, there was a moment of complete stillness. Then, one by one, guests began to clap. A handful rose from their seats, applauding with genuine admiration. Jerome rose from the bench, offering a modest nod to the critic before returning to his role as waiter. The piano's lid closed with a soft click, like the end of a secret revealed. Jerome moved back toward Marjorie's table. Tray balanced once more, but the eyes watching him had changed. No one saw him as just a waiter anymore. In that moment, he had become the very thing Marjorie had dared him to be: a remarkable pianist, whose talent had turned a careless joke into an unforgettable performance. The applause poured over Jerome like warm sunlight. He felt his cheeks flush, but he kept his hands steady as he rose from the piano bench. Glasses tinkled as the waitstaff resumed their work more quietly, all eyes still on him. Jerome walked back to Marjorie's table, his tray held firmly in one hand. The rich woman and her friend stared, their mouths slightly open. The critic had put away his notebook and was smiling broadly.
Audrey.
Sat very still. Fragile, rather than proud. Her friends exchanged uneasy glances. The woman in sunglasses shifted in her chair, clearing her throat. "That was unexpected," she said softly, her voice lacking its usual confidence. Marjorie raised her eyes to Jerome and forced a small smile, though it trembled at the edges. Jerome placed the tray on the table with practiced grace. "Can I get you anything else?" he asked, his voice calm. His tone said nothing about his talent just moments before. The table fell silent again. Finally, the woman with the dark curls pushed back her chair and spoke up. "No, thank you, Jerome," she said. "We'll just have our lunch." The critic rose and approached the table. He wore a suit that looked expensive, but not flashy, and his eyes were warm. "Pardon me," he said, leaning close to Marjorie. "That waiter Jerome, he plays beautifully. Do you realize how rare that gift is? You must play here more often." Jerome stood behind the critic, quietly waiting. Marjorie's cheeks grew pink, and she pressed her lips together. One of Marjorie's friends bit her lip and looked at the critic. "He's a waiter," she said softly. The critic nodded. "And he's also a pianist," he replied. "I know this city scene well. You have to let people like him shine. This hotel could make him part of the entertainment lineup." He turned to Jerome. "Would you consider it? Could introduce you to the hotel manager?" Jerome felt a prickling in his chest. He never dreamed of doing more than waiting tables. Music was a private joy. Yet now, with so many people watching him, and with a respected critic's words in his ears, he felt something shift inside him. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I would like that." His voice was steady, but it carried hope. Marjorie cleared her throat. She stood, her friends following suit. All 5 women stared at Jerome as if seeing him for the first time. "I'm sorry," Marjorie said, her tone softer than before. "I was out of line. I didn't mean to embarrass." Jerome paused, taken aback by her apology. He had not expected one. "Thank you," he said. He kept his voice even polite. "I appreciate that." They moved back to their conversation about lunch, but the mood was different. The rich women no longer laughed loudly or shared stories with ease. Their confidence had been shaken. Contrast, Jerome felt lighter. He continued his rounds, delivering food and drink, but the weight on his shoulders had changed. Instead of the usual focus on service, he carried a spark of possibility. After lunch, the critic stayed behind. Jerome found him at the front desk talking with the manager. The manager was a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She listened as the critic spoke, nodding thoughtfully. Jerome's heart thumped as he hesitated at the edge of the scene. The manager glanced toward him and beckoned him forward. "Jerome," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Emily Dawson. The critic tells me you gave quite a show today." Jerome shook her hand, surprised at the firm squeeze. "Thank you, Miss Dawson," he said. "I only played because he asked." "Me," Emily smiled kindly. "I'm glad he did. We would like to offer you a position as our pianist for the evening service. It's a paid role." Jerome blinked. He glanced at the critic, who gave him an encouraging nod. Jerome raised his gaze back to Emily. That sounds wonderful," he said. His voice trembled with excitement. "I would love to." Emily handed him a schedule and a small folder. "Start tonight at 7, she said. "Meet me here at 6:30, so we can go over the playlist and seating." Jerome took the folder carefully, as if it were a fragile gift. "Thank you," he whispered. As he walked away, his uniform still crisp, but now complemented by the folder under his arm, Jerome felt a mix of nerves and joy. He knew he would have to balance this new role with his cooking and cleaning tasks. But for the first time, he saw a path that could let him follow his love of music. That evening, as the sun dipped and the chandeliers glowed against the darkening sky, Jerome returned to the piano. The dining room was arranged for dinner, candles flickering on polished tables. Guests sat in pairs and small groups, sipping wine and talking quietly. Emily stood at the back, smiling as Jerome took his place. He touched the keys lightly, feeling the familiar smoothness beneath his fingertips. His first notes floated out. Into the room, a gentle greeting. Word had spread among the staff, and a few of Jerome's friends from other hotel departments slipped in to listen. The air felt electric. Jerome played a selection of jazz, then some classical pieces, weaving from one to the next with growing confidence. The guests leaned forward, many closing their eyes as they absorbed the music. Jerome's heart soared. After his first set, the manager approached him. "They love you," she whispered. "I've already had guests ask for your name. Keep you doing what you're doing?" Jerome nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. He sat back down and began the next set. In the back of the room, he saw Marjorie among the diners. She sat at a raised table near the window, alone this time. Eyes met his, and she lifted her glass in a small salute. Jerome nodded in return, a gentle smile touching his lips. That night, late after the hotel closed, Emily knocked on the door of the music room. Jerome was packing away his sheet music. "You did well tonight," she said. "We'll make this a regular thing." "Up. Thank you," he said, voice soft. "This means more than I can say." He paused, then added, "Thank you for believing in me." Emily patted his shoulder and left him to his thoughts. As Jerome walked home under a sky full of stars, he felt lighter than he had in years. Music had always been part of him, a hidden corner of his life. Now, it was growing into something real and bright. He thought of Marjorie's challenge, the critic's encouragement, and Emily's offer. That day had shown him that talent can hide in plain sight, and that a single moment can change everything. He returned to his small apartment, where his old upright piano waited in the corner. By the time the moon reached its highest point, Jerome sat at the bench again, playing softly for himself. Each note felt like a promise that from now on he would no longer hide the music inside him. He would share it and let it shine for everyone who cared to listen. Jerome woke early the next morning, his mind still buzzing from the success of the evening before. Sunlight peeked in through the curtains of his small apartment, warming the worn wooden floor. I sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, stirring slowly as he planned the day. Today he would still wear his waiter uniform, but underneath his shirt, he felt something new, a quiet excitement that grew in his chest each time. He thought of the piano bench waiting for him that evening. At the hotel, the staff greeted him with fresh smiles. The head chef patted Jerome on the shoulder as he passed in the kitchen. "Good work last night, Jerome," he said. The other waiters nodded in approval. Jerome passed their well wishes. Along with his usual tray of pastries and tea, he answered questions about how it felt to play for real diners, but he kept most thoughts to himself. Inside, he marveled at how everything had changed in just one day. During the lunch service, Jerome moved among the tables as before, but now he noticed new details in the room. He saw a young couple whispering to each other, their hands touching on the tablecloth. He saw an elderly man quietly tapping his foot to the memory of Jerome's jazz melody. Even the flowers on each table seemed brighter, as if they too had heard the music and were awakened by it. Jerome felt as if his own senses had sharpened, noticing beauty he had overlooked when life felt routine. After lunch, Jerome slipped into the music room. Emily, the hotel manager, was there waiting, held a folder of new sheet music. "I thought we could try some different styles tonight," she said kindly. Jerome nodded. She handed him the sheets, a mix of ballads, up-tempo jazz, and a few classical pieces. "Your first set was wonderful," she said. "I think our guests will love a bit more variety." Jerome allowed himself a small smile. He practiced the new pieces, his fingers finding each note with ease. The music felt like an old friend greeting him. That afternoon, Jerome went to the back office to pick up extra shifts cleaning banquet rooms. As he moved chairs and wiped tabletops, he hummed a melody under his breath. Two cleaners paused to watch him. "Really should play for a bigger crowd," one said softly. Jerome gave them a brief nod and returned to work. He kept his focus on the tasks, but his heart lifted at every compliment. In the hotel's staff cafe, Jerome caught sight of Marjorie Sinclair. She sat alone at a table, stirring her tea. His heart fluttered at the sight of her. She looked different now, no longer the proud socialite who had ordered him to play. Instead, she appeared thoughtful, as if replaying yesterday's events over and over. Jerome almost turned away, but something encouraged him to stay. Carried 2 cups of tea and approached her table. "Miss Sinclair," he said softly, "I brought you tea." Marjorie looked up, surprise and then warmth in her eyes. "Thank you, Jerome," she said. She lifted the cup in a slight gesture of thanks. Jerome placed the second cup across from hers. She motioned for him to sit, and though he hesitated, he took the empty chair. The cafe was quiet, most staff on break, but they gave Jerome space, recognizing this as an unusual moment outside of work. Marjorie stirred her tea and spoke in a gentle voice. "I wanted to thank you again for last night," she said. "You played so beautifully." Jerome sipped his tea, feeling the steam. "Thank you, ma'am," he replied. "Only played because I love it." Her eyes met his. "I realize now I was wrong to treat you as a joke," she said, her voice sincere. "I judged you without knowing anything about you." Jerome nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'm glad it brought you some surprise." She smiled, a genuine soft expression. "It did," she said. more than I ever expected. They spoke about music and life for a few minutes. Marjorie told him she had grown up playing piano herself, but had stopped when she married young. Jerome listened, grateful for her honesty. He shared a little about his childhood, how his mother taught him simple tunes on her old upright piano before she passed away. He told her how music had comforted him through hard times. Marjorie nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry you lost her," she said. Jerome looked away for a moment, remembering the past. "It was long ago," he said, "but music reminds me of her kindness." She reached out and touched his hand for a brief moment. Jerome felt a quiet peace settle over him. Later that day, Jerome prepared for the evening performance. He dressed in his waiter uniform, but this time he wore a crisp white shirt without a vest. And the collar of his shirt carried a subtle style instead of the usual emblematic of the quiet change in his identity. Clipped his name tag on and tucked the folder of music under his arm. On his way to the piano, he passed the front desk where Emily gave him an encouraging nod. He smiled back. The dining room filled quickly with guests eager for dinner, and word of mouth suggested eager to hear Jerome's playing again. Conversations buzzed softly under the glow of chandeliers. Candlelight flickered on polished tables. Jerome sat at the piano and felt the familiar smooth keys under his fingers. The room hushed instantly. He began with a gentle ballad, letting each note linger between chords. His music flowed like warm honey, and the guests closed their eyes, swaying slightly in their seats. During a pause, Jerome looked up to see Marjorie in the audience. She sat with a small group of friends, all of whom focused on him. She gave him a small thumbs up. Jerome's heart swelled at her support. He launched into a joyful jazz number next, his fingers dancing with newfound freedom and confidence. Laughter and applause followed each transition of melody, and guests called out requests. Jerome honored them, weaving between styles with ease. After the second set, the critic rose and led a heartfelt round of applause. The hotel manager stood beside him, beaming with pride. Other staff members peeked from behind doors to watch. Jerome paused at the end of his piece, bowed, and felt genuine joy. He slid off the bench and took his place back among the waitstaff, heart full. That night, after closing, Jerome packed away the sheet music in the quiet of the music room. His hands trembled slightly with happiness. Emily entered and closed the door softly. "You are magnificent again," she said. "Everyone is talking about you." Jerome shook his head in wonder. "I never imagined this," he said. "But I love it." Emily smiled. "We will keep you on as our main evening pianist," she said. "I hope you don't mind." Jerome closed the folder and looked at her. "I'm honored," he said. "Thank you for believing in me." She nodded and left, leaving Jerome alone with his thoughts. He leaned against the piano, touching the T. Smooth wood. In the hush, he remembered his mother's laugh, his first timid notes, and the day a joke turned into his greatest chance. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." As he walked home under the quiet streetlights, Jerome felt the city brimming with possibility. He had transformed from a waiter caste as a punchline into the star of the evening. Life had opened like a flower in spring. Tomorrow, he would return to the hotel with the same uniform, the same polite smile, but inside, he carried a melody that no one could take away. And in that melody, he found the courage to dream without fear. Jerome walked through the hotel lobby early that morning, the weight of yesterday's success still settling in his mind. The bright lights overhead and the polished marble floor looked the same, but to him, everything felt different. He paused by the front desk to pick up a note from Emily. It was short. "Meet me in the music room at 4. His heart skipped a beat. He wondered what she had in mind. As he passed guests checking out, they smiled and whispered his name, and he nodded back shyly. For the first time, he felt the warm buzz of recognition instead of the usual quiet service. Routine? In the music room, Emily was waiting with the hotel's event coordinator, a friendly man named Carlos. They greeted Jerome with broad smiles. Carlos said, "We'd like you to play at our charity gala next month. It's one of the biggest events in the city, and we want you to be the main act." Jerome blinked in surprise. He had never imagined playing before so many people in such a grand setting. Pictured the hotel ballroom filled with silver-haired guests in sparkling gowns. His fingers tingled just thinking about it. Emily added, "We'll give you support, extra practice time, a small stipend, and you can promote your own small concerts afterward if you like." Jerome felt tears prick his eyes. He swallowed hard and managed to say, "Thank you, I'd be honored." Back in the dining room that afternoon, Jerome paused at his first table, looked into the eyes of a grandmother nodding hello, and felt stronger. He carried platters of bruschetta and fruit tarts, but his mind danced with thoughts of the gala. All through lunch he found himself humming new tunes under his breath and smiling more than usual. His fellow waiters noticed his bright mood and teased him gently, but Jerome just laughed. It felt good to share his joy. As he passed Marjorie's old table, now occupied by other guests, he caught her eye briefly. She gave him a small wave and mouthed, "Good luck." Jerome's chest filled with warmth. She had never really been his enemy. She had simply never known how much she underestimated him. That evening, Jerome arrived early at the gala ballroom. The space was enormous, with tall windows draped in velvet curtains and a stage set with a gleaming grand piano. Rows of chairs faced the stage, and at the back, a long table held appetizers and wine under soft lights. He saw Emily and Carlos busy behind the scenes, checking microphones and testing lights. Jerome's uniform felt too ordinary for this moment, so he slipped into a simple black suit Emily had arranged. He looked at himself in the mirror and hardly recognized the quiet waiter who had first walked into the hotel months ago. Now he stood tall, shoulders back, ready to share his music with a full house. The guests began to arrive, filling the chairs in neat rows. Jerome watched as familiar faces from the hotel sat among people he didn't know, city leaders, artists, and patrons of the arts. The critic was there too, taking notes and smiling as he recognized Jerome. A hush fell as Emily stepped to the podium. She spoke about the hotel's commitment to community arts and introduced Jerome Carter as the evening's special performer. Applause rose in a wave, and Jerome felt his palms grow sweaty. He walked onto the stage, each step echoing in the silent room. When he reached the piano, he took a deep breath and touched the keys. His first notes floated through the hall like a gentle breeze. He chose a soft classical piece to start, letting each melody echo in the tall space. The audience leaned forward, attentive and respectful. Then, at the right moment, Jerome shifted to a brighter jazz tune, his fingers dancing across the keys. With grace and skill, the room came alive with sound and light, faces lit up in surprise and delight. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the music carry them away. Others whispered to their neighbors, pointing at Jerome's hands as they flew over the keys. When he finished, the silence held for a moment before a thunder of applause broke out, so loud it shook the chairs. Jerome stood and bowed, his heart pounding with joy. After the gala, Jerome was surrounded by guests who wanted to congratulate him. They took photographs, asked when he would play again, and offered invitations to other venues. For the first time, Jerome realized music could be his life's work. Yet amid all the praise, he sought out Marjorie. He found her near the exit. Standing alone with a thoughtful look, she smiled when she saw him and stepped forward. "Jerome," she said, her voice soft, "you were extraordinary tonight. I am so proud of you." Jerome felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair," he said. "It means a lot coming from you." She squeezed his hand gently. "I owe you an apology," she said. I treated you poorly before, and I regret it. Please forgive me." Jerome smiled warmly. "I forgive you," he said. "Glad you gave me a chance." They stood quietly for a moment, two people from different worlds connected by music and respect. That night, as he walked home under streetlights, Jerome carried no folder and held no trays. He walked lightly, humming a soft melody of his own making. He thought of the journey that had begun with a cruel joke and led to standing before a room full of admirers. He felt grateful for the critic who saw his talent, for Emily and Carlos, who believed in him, and even for Marjorie, whose misstep opened the door. Jerome went inside his apartment and sat at his old upright piano by the window. He played a gentle tune that reminded him of his mother's lullabies. Outside the city, lights twinkled like stars. Jerome closed his eyes, letting the music fill the room, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Jerome woke the next morning with the soft light of dawn touching his face. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside his window. Last night's gala felt like a dream, but the framed photo on his bedside table reminded him it was real. It showed him at the piano, bowing before a sea of smiling faces. He sat up and touched the smooth wood of his old upright piano in the corner. His fingers traced a familiar path over the keys, and he played a few soft notes. Music had become his true calling, and with each chord, he felt more alive. At the hotel, the staff greeted Jerome with bright smiles and warm words. The head chef offered him a pastry, and the front desk clerk waved as he passed. Even the bellhops seemed to tip their hats in respect. Jerome felt a deep gratitude. He carried trays of coffee and tea, but now he did so with a quiet pride. Between orders, he slipped notes into his pocket. Venue booking forms, invitations, from local theaters, and a small contract from the City Arts Council. His life was filling with possibilities beyond his wildest hopes. Marjorie Sinclair found him during breakfast service. She approached him with a cup of green tea in her hand. She looked calm and genuine. "Good morning, Jerome," she said, with a soft smile. "I wanted to thank you again for last night. The gala was more beautiful because of your music." Jerome paused, surprised at how icily her words came. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair," he replied. "Your support means a lot to me." She nodded and lowered her voice. "I have been thinking," she said. "I would like to host a small recital for hotel guests, just a cozy evening of music and tea. Would you consider performing?" Jerome's heart lifted. "I would love to," he said. That afternoon, Jerome found himself in a new world. He walked through the hotel's grand corridors, carrying sheet music instead of serving trays. He met with the event coordinator to plan the recital. They chose a quiet salon with velvet chairs and low lighting. Jerome picked songs that spoke of hope, love, and new beginnings. He added a few of his own compositions, simple melodies inspired by his mother's lullabies. As he practiced in the music room, he felt the notes flow through him like water, clear and true. He imagined the audience smiling, their hearts touched by the sound. In the week leading up to the recital, news of Jerome spread outside the hotel. A local newspaper ran a short story about the waiter-turned-pianist, whose morning lullabies echoed in a grand ballroom the night before. People stopped him in the lobby, asking for details. Some asked where they could hear him play next. A young music teacher approached him with a hopeful look. "My students need inspiration," she said. "Could you come to our school and play for them?" Jerome agreed without hesitation. He felt a responsibility to share his gift wherever he could. Every new request was a reminder of how his life had changed. The evening of the recital arrived. Candlelight flickered on polished tables, and soft music played as guests found their seats. Jerome sat at the piano bench wearing a simple black suit that felt more like his true uniform now. He took a steadying breath and began with a gentle piece by Chopin. The room hushed, and the notes floated like whispers. He moved to a jazz standard. Next, adding his own soulful touch. Then he played one of his original songs, a melody that spoke of sunrise and hope. When he finished, the room filled with quiet applause before a gentle wave of cheers. He bowed deeply, feeling a warmth in his chest that came from knowing he had shared something true. After the recital, Jerome mingled with guests, accepting kind words and answering questions about his music. Marjorie found him again, her eyes shining. "You were wonderful," she said. "Everyone loved your original piece." Jerome smiled. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he replied. She nodded. "You remind me that respect and kindness can come from unexpected places," she said. Jerome's heart swelled. He realized that their brief conflict had led to this moment of understanding between them. He often thought back to that first lunch when she made her joke. Now they stood as equals, united by music and mutual respect. In the days that followed, Jerome balanced his work as a waiter with his growing career as a pianist, kept his uniform crisp and his smile genuine. But each evening, he traded his apron for the piano bench. He played at local events, schools, and small community gatherings. His original compositions found their way into the playlists of a local radio station. He even started teaching piano lessons to children on weekends, sharing the passion his mother once gave him. His apartment, once quiet and lonely, now filled with the laughter of students and the soft glow of lamplight over sheet music. One morning, Jerome found a letter slipped under his door. It was from Marjorie Sinclair. Inside, she had written a note of apology for the way she had treated him that day in the dining room, in gratitude for the lessons he had taught her about humility and talent. At the bottom of the page, she invited him to a charity fundraiser she was organizing for underprivileged music students. Jerome smiled as he read her words. He placed the letter on his piano and touched the keys thoughtfully. Their story had begun with a joke, but it had grown into a friendship based on respect and shared love of music. Weeks later, Jerome stood on a small stage at the fundraiser organized by Marjorie. Children played violin, flute, and guitar. When it was his turn, Jerome walked to the piano, looking out at smiling faces of all ages. He began to play a new piece, one he composed for that moment, a melody of gratitude and joy. As the final notes faded, the room erupted in applause. He looked at Marjorie in the front row, who raised her hand in a small wave. Jerome felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It transformed his life through talent and kindness, and he had helped others see the power of respect and opportunity. That night, as Jerome walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, he hummed the new melody. He thought of every person who had believed in him, the critic in the restaurant, Emily the manager, Marjorie the guest, and the strangers who listened to his music. He thought of his mother, whose lullabies had sparked his journey. In his heart, Jerome knew that life could change in an instant. He had once been the waiter at a fancy luncheon, then a prank, then the pianist, and now a man who used his gift to touch many lives. He opened his apartment door and sat at his piano one more time. In the stillness, he played softly to himself, each note a promise that music, like hope, could turn any moment into something beautiful.